What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they used to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. Hey everybody, I got a great show for you today, because today's guest has been in and around the broadcast and communications industry, in particular as it relates to sports, his entire career, which spans 4 decades. And once you hear his voice, you're most likely going to recognize him from his time in the mid-90s to the early 2000s as one of the anchors for ESPN's flagship show, SportsCenter, because he was there in the heyday alongside Dan Patrick, Keith Olbermann, Chris Berman, Linda Cohn, Robin Roberts, Mike Tirico, Bob Lee, Steve Levy, Charlie Stein, that whole group, which is legendary in the sporting world. Not only do we talk about his time in that heyday period at ESPN, but we get into a lot of things that are hot topics in the golf world right now, such as the Premier Golf League, the recent study by the USGA on distance and the entire debate that revolves around that. Also, his time spent at XM Sirius Radio for the PGA Tour Network, and all the things that he experienced while inside the ropes as an on-course reporter. He is just a wonderful guy. He gives so much insight into the communications industry and what it was like to be in that field for so long and experience so many different things. He tells a ton of great stories that I'm sure everybody's going to love to hear. So please sit back, relax, and give a big Golf 360 welcome to today's guest, Mr. Bob Stevens. All right, I'm here with Bob Stevens. Bob, welcome to Golf 360.
Good to be with you.
Caddying today, huh?
Yeah, caddied today. Caddied a long week, actually, 3 days in a row, which is long for me. I'm too old for that.
And you're at Harbortown?
Yeah, walking
Here
around
in the
Harbortown and 3 completely different days. A very rainy day, a day that was cloudy, and then 18 was just horrible to play. Dead into the wind, dead into the rain, sideways. Mm-hmm. But I had a match going, 2-on-2, best ball kind of match, and the team that was winning couldn't put it away. We could have been dry. Well, it didn't start raining until 15, and they didn't win 15. But they were still 2 up with 3 to go, but they didn't win 16 either. And then they lost 17, so they were only 1 up, and they had to play 18 in the rain. And they didn't want to, and I didn't want to, but they wouldn't give it up. So that's how golfers are. And then the next day, very windy all day, 20, 25-mile-an-hour wind. And then the next day, today, was not bad at all. A little breezy, but... springtime in the low country.
That's right.
Good stuff.
Yeah. 18, the winds do wreak havoc on that hole, especially.
Yeah.
Yeah, this time when did it switch? About April or May? I'm sorry, April?
Yeah, late
March?
April. After the tournament, the winds usually turn around and come out of the south. And,
so it's downwind then, into the wind now.
Yeah. It was dead into the wind the last couple of days, which makes it a nice, reasonable par 5.
So that you spent a lifetime in and around sports and
covering
golf, and does that give you a completely different perspective now, caddying? Being right there, seeing what people are thinking and how they go through their
and trying to get them to think a different way and whatever. I all the respect in the world I always have for the regular tour caddies, although it's a whole completely different deal caddying for a tour quality or even a very good player. A couple of days ago, I had from this group that we had down from Tennessee, I had the teaching pro and these 2 kids who could play and their dad, and they wanted to play it all the way back. And John Farrell said, "All right, go. You can play it from the plates, as they call it, the tips. Most of us would say." And they played fairly well. Actually, one of them had a hole-in-one. I had a hole-in-one. That's a hole-in-one.
Free drinks?
At 4. Well, it was the teaching pro, and I actually asked one of the guys today, I says, "So did that cost him a lot of money?" He says, "No, we know what he makes. He's the teaching pro. We didn't make him cough up for all the drinks."
My last hole-in-one, I was lucky enough to have it at a member guest. So
how many do you have?
5 or 6.
Really? Mm-hmm. Woo. I don't have one.
The good thing was it was the member guest, so the open bar. That was that was a good thing. What got you to Hilton Head? Why here from Connecticut?
Well, it all actually began coming to Hilton Head when I lived in Cleveland, and you say Ohio coming to Hilton Head, and then everybody says, "Oh, okay, that's why." And
northern part of the South Carolina is Ohio.
Yeah, there you go. And so we used to come down here on vacations, and thought at some point that might be a nice place to retire to, maybe. And when things ended for me in Connecticut, and we could go anywhere because whatever it was I was probably going to end up doing was probably going to be freelance. Where do we want to do it from? And all I needed was an airport. So Savannah was close enough, and we thought, gee, could we do Hilton Head? My wife and I, we had 2 very young daughters. Will they be okay? Connecticut schools versus South Carolina schools. That's not a good play, but Connecticut schools versus Hilton Head schools is a different play. The Hilton Head schools, public schools, are terrific, and our girls came down here and went for a number of years there. They graduated from high school and other places, but they did it here, and so that's what got us to Hilton Head after Connecticut, plus the desire not to shovel snow.
That's a very strong
huge desire. It was a huge desire. In fact, the first year we moved down here, we used to live on a very steep, sloped lot in Connecticut, and it was $40 every time the guy came and plowed it.
Jeez.
And that was sometimes twice a day if it was really snowy. And so we had a big brandy snifter on our counter on our bar here. The first winter we moved down, and every time we saw that it was snowing up there, we threw another $40 into the snifter down here that we had saved, and put it together for a pretty nice party at the end of winter.
Yeah, it probably paid for vacation.
Yeah, no kidding. We're on vacation all the time when you live here.
That's right. What do we have? 300 days of golfable weather a year.
Seems like it.
And if it isn't, you're right. It seems like it.
It's actually 365. You just got to be. You got to work the margins a little bit. For the Canadians, it's 365.
For us that have lived here for a while, it's like probably closer to 3 because
probably closer to 200 because we're picky now.
We're very picky.
Now it's too windy, or it's 5 degrees too cold.
I used to have the 50-degree rule. Now it's like gone up to 60, 65.
There you go.
If I wear more than 2 layers, no, not doing
That's
it.
what Bob Hope used to say. He would always shoot 70 or better. If it wasn't 70 or better, he wouldn't play. So
let me. There's been a lot of news in golf.
Sure.
Lately, so before we get into kind of your career and some other things, let's talk just a little bit about some of the things that have been loudest in golf. So the one I want to lead into first is the Premier Golf League.
Yeah, that's
talking about top 40 guys or top 50 guys, and there's $10 million to the winner. What do you think of that?
It'll screw up the game. The pro game. It'll just foul it up because if the top 40 don't play the PGA Tour can't do what it does for the other 150 guys who play on and off the tour. It's a terrible idea for the big picture. Great idea for those 40 guys, and probably TV ratings wise, maybe a decent. I don't think it would be that much better because are those guys going to, how many tournaments are there going to be? How many of them are they going to play? I mean, there's still a lot of gray area in here. If those top 40 guys left the PGA Tour, there'd be a problem for the tour.
Right.
And so you don't see that happening because I don't think that the top 40 want to play. They'd probably love to play just 10 times a year and have it be worth a whole lot of money. But, those top 40 guys, they want to play too. I mean, they love the game. We think guys play it for the money. They really don't. Most of them I don't think do. They love the competition. They love the game. So the more they can play up to a point, the better. The more they can play well, maybe that's the point we should make. Then they'll do that. I don't think it's going to happen. There may be more events that are like the WGCs. There may be a few more of those, but I'm not a big fan. It ain't broke. I don't think there's anything that needs to be fixed.
And this is like the second go around. Remember Greg Norman?
Had the and that was kind of before I was following it completely, and I was, before I really became smitten by it all. But yeah, Norman wanted to do that thing, and again, I think the tour was able to slap that down. This got a lot of money. If this pro golf thing, if it is what everybody says it is from a money standpoint, it's a lot of Middle Eastern money, it's a lot of European money, and that might be enough to make it go for a little while. But I just think it creates a lot of headaches that you probably don't want to create.
Well, I think you can see the differences in the personalities. So Mickelson seems to be all for it, right? He's more of a gambler, risk taker. But I don't think if they don't get Tiger, which I don't think they will,
right?
I don't think it gets off the ground.
No,
and I think Tiger being more the traditionalist, and he likes spending time with his kids. He is not 100% golf anymore.
Tiger wants to play when Tiger wants to play.
That's right,
and he can. Congratulations, that's a pretty good deal. If they got a tournament on a week he doesn't want to play, or if they put 2 weeks in a row together, maybe he doesn't want to play one of them. I mean, unless those 40 guys commit to playing pretty much all of them of the tournaments that they create, I would think it's not going to go. And yeah, you're right. I mean, if Tiger doesn't want to play, it's not going to happen.
Right.
I'd love to see Tiger play the Champions Tour a little bit just for fun, because it looks like he's finally starting to have a little more fun playing the game.
He's enjoying it.
I think he is. And if he would do that, when he turns 50, maybe just play the majors. That's what Nicklaus did those first few years. Just played the senior majors. But play the senior majors and have some fun. The game is so much fun when Tiger's having fun playing it. That's been the best part to me of the comeback of Tiger, is that he's having some fun now, and he was such a grinder and such a competitor before, even when he was playing well. It didn't look like he was having a lot of fun, except at the end when he won.
Right.
But now it looks like he has fun a little more often. And
it's a shame. You have to have sometimes something taken away to appreciate what you had, and it's like it's not worth.
We all have that, yeah.
It's just a life thing.
Sure.
Let's talk a little bit about the distance debate. USGA came out with their report. What do you? Because again, your time in communication and broadcasting and so forth has been around to see these major changes the last 3-4 decades.
Sure. I like to see it. It's kind of funny because when we caddy at Harbor Town, we tell the players when they ask us or when we have some input on what tee they're going to play, so we want you to play your second shots from where the pros play. Mm-hmm. We'll give them that 100 yards that they're going to hit it further than you, and let's set it up to where you can hit that second shot from where they play, so you get a feel for how they play the course. And it's getting harder to do that because they keep hitting it farther and farther.
Right.
And yet, I'd like to see them dial the ball back a little bit. But the game will adjust. I mean, so you hit it really long. Well, if you don't hit it straight, if you'll hit it really long and wide. I had that with the amateurs that I had who wanted to play from the plates. When they hit it wide, it was way wild, and because they could hit it so far, and they were even farther into trouble. The guys who bump it along and kept it in the middle, will sometimes score better. You're not going to roll back. You shouldn't roll back the ball for the regular person. I mean, you and I should be able to play whatever we want to play, however they want to soup it up. That's great. And Hale Irwin once, I heard him tell a story that when he learned to play the game and when he was at his club and when he obviously was a good player, when they would play the big Saturday morning game, they'd have a big bowl of golf balls. They're all the same. Put your hand in there, take two, and go. And everybody played the same ball that way, mm-hmm. and you learned how to golf whatever ball that was, and it wasn't. I don't notice that much difference in golf balls anyway. I'm not that discriminating, not that much of a good purist, but take the ball that they throw you and go play that and play different shots. So I can go either way. If they want to play the long ball and all of that, it makes some courses a little more obsolete, maybe, but that's what I love. That's what I love about a place like Harbor Town. They can't make it any longer. Mm-hmm. It's not very long, and yet the same score wins every year. You got to be 12, 13, 14 under, and and if the wind blows, it's only going to be 9 or 10.
That's right.
And if it's dead calm and gorgeous, Brian Gay can shoot 20 under. But other than that, you know what you're going to get. The great courses. We watched Riviera a couple of weeks ago. It was still Riviera, mm-hmm. and Pebble Beach, and the weather and the way you can set up. Guys can now set up golf courses. They can determine what score it is and how you set it up. You tuck the pins. You put them in bad spots and guys can't get to them. Then the scores will be different.
Yeah, I had Tim Morgan. Tim very well, local guy. He was on the show, and we were talking about course conditions, and following him on Twitter, he's very big on, why would you roll back the ball? You're not riding a horse anymore. You're driving in a fuel-efficient mm-hmm. Tesla electric mm-hmm. car. So mm-hmm. no one wants to go back to riding in horses and carriages. So why would you do the same to golf? But his big thing is, you can adapt the golf courses to accommodate the difference in length or the less curvature of a golf ball and so on. So, yeah, there's ebbs and flows to everything. And you're right. I think the vast majority of people would say, leave the ball alone. Leave the athletes alone. Leave the equipment alone. Modify it to what you need to do to adjust the score. I mean, look at the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
Outside of a few times in the last couple of years, it's always around even par that wins.
Yeah. And look what they did. And that's the great time when you can compare it is when they play a U.S. Open on a tour course like they did last year when they played Pebble Beach. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what Gary Woodland was when it was all said and done, but it wasn't a whole lot under par. And they just set up the course a little bit differently than they do for the tour. And, it adapted to the golfers.
The easiest way to Make the scores higher. Narrow the fairways, stick in the rough, and firm up the greens.
There you go.
It's not a hard solution. They've been doing that for
right.
decades or generations.
And when the courses are soft, guys are going to score.
Mm-hmm.
And no matter how hard the USGA or the PGA of America or the PGA Tour tries, you get a little rain on a golf course on Wednesday, and Thursday's going to be a whole lot of fun.
If those guys at that level know that their ball is going to hit and stop where it lands, it's a shootout. It's a putting contest.
And yet, and that's what. But and that gives us all something to argue about. Oh, the course was too hard. Oh, the course was too soft or whatever. And part of that's half of the game is talking about it. Right. In our case, it's all about it. It's 100%.
There wouldn't be the show if there wasn't
right.
that stuff. There wouldn't be half the shows on your former employee at the network. There seems to be an expert panel for everything.
Yeah, really.
And what's crazy is the thing you find out about expert panels, whether you're talking about stocks or sports prediction or Super Bowl or Masters, they're never right.
No. Have you ever noticed that? I think it would be a fun thing for the Golf Channel on Mondays, which is kind of a down day, when you've already, you've got your winner. Go back, play back Wednesday's show. Or at least that last segment of Wednesday's show where they tell them to pick a winner. I mean, you can't. First of all, you can't pick a winner in golf anymore. Anyway, there's too many guys who are too good. It's too hard to do, and so. But yeah, I think that'd be fun, is to play back the Wednesday afternoon, the Wednesday show, the last show before the tournament, play it back and then laugh at the guys. And if one of them ever gets it right, he's got bragging rights for a long time. Because they never get it right.
Let's go back. So you've spent a career in communication.
Yep.
What was the draw? What was the attraction?
Well, for me, I mean, I realized at a fairly young age I couldn't play, whether it was baseball growing up or whatever. I got addicted to golf, I guess addicted a little bit to it. We lived on a wheat farm in Washington State, but I had a pretty decent sized backyard, and I had a little chipper that I could put an orange juice can in each end. And I had 3 different kinds of golf balls, and I could be Jack and Arnie and Gary or Trevino. I could pick whoever I wanted to, and I'd play back and forth just with this little chipper in my backyard, and having to bump it off all the imperfections of the backyard and whatever, and loved it. Mm-hmm. And I could also announce it, and so that kind of got me into that part of it, and was that's kind of where I got the love for it. Started playing the game in junior high school, and then moved to California and played on the high school golf team. We weren't very good, but there weren't very many of us who played either. So I got to make the team. so got to play then, and then when I went to college, I love to tell people I went to college in at the University of Tulsa and went to school with Nancy Lopez. Now, I knew Nancy. She might have known me in college, but I knew, obviously we all knew who she was. And she, so then you get gravitated. I knew Ron Streck when played out of there too. And Hank Haney was actually lived in the same dorm I did. And he, by the way, would have been probably the least likely to succeed of anybody.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Was he in the golf team?
He played some. He was kind of one of those bubble guys, 5th, 6th kind of player. You never saw him as becoming a big-time teacher, that's for sure.
Right.
We were just kind of trying to keep him sober all week, and because he had a lot of fun in college. But but anyway, but Tulsa's a great golf community. Southern Hills. When just about the time I'm graduating from college, and I'm working at a local radio station, we get a U.S. Open. In the 77 Open that Hubert Green won. And so I get to cover it. I get to spend a whole week out there covering the U.S. Open, for crying out loud, and it was fantastic. So that kind of got me into the whole golf thing, and I was already doing radio and TV at the time, kind of at the same time. So it kind of all came together maybe after the 77 Open. And
now, he was having a lot of death threats during that tournament, wasn't he?
That was the tournament where he got them on Sunday, and we didn't know about it in the press room. We could tell there was a bigger police presence around him when he was playing the last few holes. I wasn't out on the golf course. I stayed in a tent because it was hot. and I was lazy, and and it was easier to watch the whole tournament watching it on TV. You go, any of you who go to a tournament, the people who know the least about what's actually going on in a tournament are the people who are on the side, or out on the course. And I had watched him play I'd watched enough golf, and but wanted to watch it finish up, and obviously. So anyway, that was a tough tournament for him to finish, but he finished and he won, and that was one of those. We talk about making the predictions. We had that was back in the day when a media credential, a clubhouse credential, whatever it is, would get you. You were in the clubhouse with the guys, and I had lunch with Hubert Green on Tuesday. He was just sitting there having lunch. He said, "Pull up a chair." And we just were chatting about Hubert Green being Hubert Green, and he was obviously a top-notch player at the time, but would not have been a favorite, and yet he played great that week, and that made his career, winning 77.
Yeah, lots changed. There were no entourages back then.
No, the guys were just there, and you could, I mean, going even further back, when I was in high school in California, I lived lived a few miles away from where they had the Bob Hope every year, and I'd play hooky a couple of days of the week of the Bob Hope. My grandparents lived on one of the courses that they played, and they wanted my step grandfather was a marshal and whatever, so he'd take me and let me go on a course. I had autographs from guys. I had Arnold Palmer's autograph standing there waiting to hit a shot on Saturday. They didn't, and the vibe then was, that was when the Bob Hope was the Bob Hope,
right?
And it was all celebrities, and it was all, guys who were just having a great time, and the pros were having a good time too. Way laid back, not of the pressure. There were ropes, but the guys worked the ropes. If they weren't trying to find that middle of the fairway spot that they could walk down where they could be as far away from the gallery as possible. After they'd hit the shot, they'd go over and sign autographs and talk to people, and they were all just having a good time. So that was another place where I said, this golf thing is pretty cool.
Do you think golf has lost some of that?
Oh, lost a lot of it.
Almost all of it.
I got to do, when I worked for Sirius XM covering the tour, got to do it probably one of the last times it happened, when Bill Clinton was hosting the Bob Hope, or it was, it renamed it for Clinton, I think. And Saturday he played, and he and the Humana was actually the sponsor. He and the CEO of Humana and Norman and Scotty McCarron were the foursome, and Norman and McCarron weren't even playing in a tournament, but they just kind of put that foursome in the middle of everything to do something. And the tour gave me clearance. I met the Secret Service guy who was working with Clinton and whatever, and the tour guy said, Bob's okay to walk inside the ropes, and he's doing radio, and and they said, okay, fine, he's good. So I went wherever I wanted to go, and would talk to the president after he had finished a hole, because he loves talking golf. You get him on your podcast.
Yeah, I probably need to reach out.
He just loves to talk golf, and is very serious about it. Did you see that shot I hit? That last hole. How did that bad hop come in? To keep me from being within 6 feet when I was at 42 feet instead, and just absolutely loved the game. And the guys had fun playing with him. It was a terrific day. But he worked the rope line too. Back to your question, he'd hit a shot and he would go, and it was funny because the next day I talked to Zach Johnson. And Zach they're probably not politically matched up, he and Clinton, very well, but he obviously knew Clinton was hosting the tournament, and Clinton had worked the range. He had gone out to the practice range on like Thursday or Friday and was working the range. I mean, going up and meeting guys and just, schmoozing, doing what politicians do.
And he's not even in politics anymore.
Yeah, and he was out then, but doing what politicians do. That's what he does. That's his job and his life. And he said, we don't probably agree on a lot of things, but when he came up and he said, Zach, how are you? And he said, how are your parents back in Iowa? I remember meeting them over at the Ryder Cup a couple of years ago. They were terrific. How's your dad doing? And he had that knowledge. You knew why Clinton was as good as he was at what he did, because he knew, and I mean, he looked everybody right in the eye, made you feel like you were the most important person there. And whether you liked his politics or not, he was a great politician and very well suited for that kind of host of a golf tournament kind of job. Yeah, it was good stuff.
When you were at Tulsa, did you ever have to cover Nancy Lopez for the?
Never had to cover her. Again, I had classes with her. Probably the story that I tell people. This will be the first time I've ever told it on the air, though.
That's right. You saved it for this show.
I was a senior. She was a sophomore. We were both getting ready to leave school. They were kicking me out, and she was kicking them out. And she would tell us in class, she says, "Oh yeah, I got this agent I'm probably going to sign with, who's really hustling me, Mark McCormick, who was Jack and Arnie's and the super agent." And he said. He says, I would make $150,000 the first year, wouldn't have to win a nickel. I would make that much in endorsements.
That's a lot of money.
With him. Oh, yeah. In 1977, you bet. But I have to lose 15 pounds because part of it was a clothing deal with JCPenney. And can you imagine an agent trying to tell anybody, a woman, to do that now?
No.
No,
they'd be out of business.
With that. Yeah, you're not
front page news.
Yeah, you're not going to get away with that. But you know what? Nancy could do it. She was really good at controlling her weight. She could get chubby at times, but then she'd lose the weight if she wanted to, and it was just a mind over matter thing. And so when she needed to, she'd get thinner. And amazingly, it hardly ever affected her golf game. Usually, it does when guys take off. Right. We see that all the time. But anyway, she was just a terrific person, terrific player on a team of very good players. Half of her team went pro and played on the LPGA Tour and had success. But she was special. To me, she's the Arnold Palmer of women's golf.
Oh, yeah, there's no doubt about it. And I don't think there's even been anyone close.
Annika would be the Nicklaus probably,
right,
or maybe the Tiger. But yeah, she was. She was terrific.
Why do you think that is? That there's not even anyone that comes close that even pops into your mind who is engaging with the gallery and the public, and
there are not any Americans who are really like that now, but overall the tour is delightfully conversant. Public, happy, engaging, I guess is the best word to use. The LPGA does a wonderful job of making friends. They don't have the superstar. Nancy won 5 in a row tournaments during one stretch,
right?
And you do that. And you've got that smile, and she had the charisma. She had the Palmer type charisma.
That's like America's sweetheart.
Yeah, and that's tough to match. Those are one of a kind of people. Phil is Phil is today's Arnie, where Tiger was today's Jack. Tiger was better probably, but Phil. You've seen Phil, work a rope line after he plays around for 45 minutes. He'll sign and sign and sign and sign, and was just terrific about it. And that's what made him as popular, obviously, as he is. When Tiger probably had a better game, but Tiger didn't like to do that. So.
Do you see anyone coming up, whether it's on the men's or ladies tour, that has that charisma or has the ability to do that?
Jordan Spieth has it. Now he's got to play a little better.
Right. He's got to put himself where they want to
do that part.
Right.
Jordan Spieth, my Jordan Spieth story, I've got a couple of them, but when I knew Jordan was going to be special, I can actually say I knew it in high school because I covered the Byron Nelson when he played in it as a junior and as a senior. And as a junior, both years he top 10 and was playing late on Sunday in both tournaments. And it was the senior year. He on Sunday or Saturday, he told the media that was there, he kind of came by before he went to the range, on his way out to the range, because we were all kind of waiting at the range. Occasionally people were doing interviews and stuff, but he said, guys, I says, help me today. He says, I've got to, I'm going to be quick on the back end. I can't do one-on-ones. I got to kind of do everybody together because I got to go graduate from high school.
That's a good excuse.
It was graduation day at his high school, and he says, "So I can give you 5 minutes or whatever when we're done, but then I got to go. Hopefully you guys understand. I apologize in advance that I'm going to have to be fairly quick, but I will still do whatever." And that's when you knew. I mean, if he's that savvy at 18, you knew something special was going to happen. Yeah. Good stuff.
I'd like to see him come back.
But I think he's that kind of guy. On the other side, Dustin's not. Koepka's very honest when he does do interviews, but I don't get the feeling that he loves doing it. You got to find guys who just enjoy the back and forth and the engaging with people who like to talk to people.
Right.
Where we all have different personalities. There's some people love to chat, some people don't, and that's the difference. And then you got to add the talent to it.
Did you see anything out there where that has caused Jordan to have his little dip? Was there anything you saw?
I don't know. I don't know enough. You'd have a better handle on that than I would.
Right.
I think he gets in his own way a little bit now. You're very big and in tune on the mind and the golf game. Golf is best played dumb. You start thinking and it all goes to pieces. And I know that flies in the face of what you do.
Right.
But Dustin is when Dustin is really good, it's when he's just letting it go. Just let it fly. And Jordan obviously has the ability to focus and to get in a zone and to think. For example, that shot at the British Open that won the Open a few years ago, the last tournament he won. He got out of his way. He got into it enough to know what he had to do, and then got out of his way otherwise. But I think if he gets out of his own way, he'll be fine.
I kind of related Jordan to like a supercharged V6, as far as if you're going to compare him to Dustin and Tiger and Phil. And it's not that he didn't have it. It's just that his engine had to run much more efficient than the other guys because he didn't have the length.
No.
But his short game's phenomenal, so he makes up for a lot there. And his brain, the way he thinks around a course is
which is
second
why
maybe to Tiger.
Which is why I thought he would be less apt to have the problem that he's having than the other guys. Because yes, it had to run finely tuned, but it wasn't a Mercedes or a Maserati. It wasn't a foreign high-powered engine. It was a Chevy. Easier to keep in tune and going forward and whatever. So I'm surprised that he's had the slump that he's had, and I think obviously we all root for him to come back.
From some of the people I talked to, that the theory is, at least this is what I was told, that he started chasing the distance. And it was when Jason Day knocked it by him, I think 40 or 50 yards. Was it the PGA?
At the PGA when Jason won up at Whistling Straits,
and you can see it because I think Tiger went through the same thing, and Tiger even finally admitted it. See, he went after the distance because he went so long where nobody was longer than him except maybe Daly. I mean, if you're the one that's knocking at 30 by everybody, and then you take your time on, and then all of a sudden people knock at 30 by you, there is an ego at that level.
Well, sure there is.
Right? I mean, that's how you get there. It's part of the recipe.
And that's why, how many guys have you seen win one major?
You don't even remember.
How many win two? The difference between 1 and 2 is a lot. I don't want to say that anybody can win one major, but a lot of guys have.
There's enough talent that they can have a good week. Right.
You got it. Then you're talking. You got to be, and that's. I mean, Jordan's got however many, 3 or 4 or however many he's got, but you gotta. Yeah, sometimes you start trying to be a major champion. The point I was trying to make was the guys who've won one. A lot of them won the one, and then they tried to change their game.
Mm-hmm.
What was wrong?
Well,
nothing
look
was
at Craig
wrong.
Perks.
You won.
And it wasn't a major, but he won the so-called fifth major, the TPC. Craig Perks won. He had a 5-year exemption.
Sure.
He thought he'd retool his whole game.
Yeah.
It's like, you just won one of the biggest
and I know
events in golf.
Perksy, and he knows he did the wrong thing. Now, he knew he'd done the wrong thing probably 2 years into the 5-year exemption, and said, "Uh-oh," and then he couldn't find what he had, and it's terrible. I mean, guys that I've known who've been on the tour, been off it, and they try to change things. Mm-hmm. You know, Billy Joel was right. Don't go changing.
No, not if you've done it.
Not if you've done it and you've been successful at it.
If you're at that level, let's say, well, Spieth was a little bit of an anomaly when he was 21.
Yeah.
So, but most guys or girls are winning majors when they're in their mid-20s, maybe late 20s. So if they started when they were 7, let's say they've done it the same way for 20 years, and now you're approaching the peak of your career, and you're going to change it.
Well, and those guys have also had problems. They've had slumps before. Mm-hmm. Jordan Spieth has never been anything other than really, really, really good. Mm-hmm. He came right out on tour and won. And he never had the growing pains that most touring pros have. And so now that he's in a slump, now what do I do? Because he's never had to. He's never had
to solve that problem.
Yeah, and in the meantime, he has to solve it in front of everybody. Mm-hmm. He can't solve it being somebody nobody knows. Now we all know him.
I wouldn't be surprised if he reached out to Tiger at some point and said, "Hey,
Might.
What I went through is not what you did, but that's why I'm reaching out. Can you help me with this?
Yeah, give me the mental something. Give me a little something to
I know
go
we're
on.
Competing against each other. You're not going to give me everything, but can you help me at all?"
But that's one of the beauties of the game of golf is guys do help each other. Mm-hmm. Guys do give each other. You walk around a putting green at a tour event, and guys are helping each other.
Oh yeah, when I was playing, it was crazy. During the round, you're trying to step and stomp on each other's throat and cut your heart out. But then after the round, if you're practicing together, the guy you just played with, you say, "Hey, can you check if I'm doing this in my swing?" Yeah, and it is. It's an amazing dynamic.
It's an amazing dynamic in the game, and I've always been amazed that guys do it. And that it's kind of the accepted practice, which is great. I mean, that's one of the wonderful things about the game.
Mm-hmm. I think it's a respect of skill. Yeah. And you see that a lot in like mixed martial arts. I have enough friends in that field, and my girlfriend, I'll be watching it. She's like, how can you watch guys try to beat the hell out of each other, and then they shake hands? And I try to explain to her, because it's not a fight. It's a test of skill. Yeah. In much the same way that golf is a test of skill.
Sure it is.
And so I think if the mentality is if you're going to test yourself against the best, you want those other golfers playing their best, because you want to say that you beat everybody. It goes a little bit back to that ego thing where golfers have a little bit of an ego. So they're not going to get to where they are.
Golfers have a lot of ego.
Yeah. Let me get into a little bit into your career.
Sure.
But before I do, I did, when I was doing a little bit of homework on you, I know you had a long time, but I didn't know you won an Emmy Award.
Yeah, it's not the Hollywood Emmy Award. The Emmys, there are regional Emmy Awards, and I won a regional Emmy.
Yeah, but that's still pretty big stuff.
Yeah, well, my wife won it, and I happened to be able to. I was a part of it. I was for the opening day of the baseball park in Cleveland, Jacobs Field, then now Progressive Field, and we did she was the producer of the morning show that was there opening day, and I sat in a dugout and interviewed guys. I mean, I had the easy job, but we both have Emmys. So.
Did that time when you were working at Cleveland, was there something that you did there, or with her help, or whatever you did that kind of led to the opportunity at ESPN?
Oh yeah, I mean, I was the guy you watched at 6 and 10 or 6 and 11 doing the sports in Cleveland at the ABC station, and she was like I say, she worked at the same place. She worked mornings, I worked nights. Our kids are a bit of an immaculate conception kind of thing, but but yeah, that's what I did, and ESPN, I had been back and forth with them a couple of different times, and then when they started ESPN News is when they hired me. They needed to hire 10 or 12 guys, and they hired a bunch of us, and that most of them were young, and I was the older guy that they hired to come in and be the older guy And then when I was at
you were like the
ESPN.
Crash Davis.
Yeah, really, a little bit. And and at the end of the movie, Crash Davis gets released, and that's kind of what happened to me. But I was there for 6 years and had a good run there, and certainly no complaints. It was a great place to work. It was fun.
Would you say that was the heyday of ESPN?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so too.
Yeah, I mean we got there just when Disney had bought the company. I'll give you a little inside. There's a little inside business here. Disney had just bought it from Capital Cities, which owned ABC and was a broadcasting network. Well, Disney's Disney. Disney wanted ESPN because it was a cash machine. It just made buckets of money. And at the beginning, ESPN Disney would tell ESPN at the start of year 1, 2, and 3 that I was there, we just want a check for $1 billion at the end of the year.
Oh, that's it. Just $1 billion.
Here's the good part. ESPN would write the check on the 2nd of January.
That's amazing.
And give it to them and say, okay, now leave us alone. And Disney did, and ESPN flourished, made even more money. They really had a philosophy in those days, in the late 90s, that rather than a lot of businesses try to squeeze more blood out of the turnip, they just planted more turnips. They just, okay, let's do another network. Let's do this. Let's spend money to make money. Amazing.
Yeah, if your return
philosophy.
is 20, 30, 50%, then just make more returns.
Make more, and just do more rather than trying to squeeze a little more out of what you had. So it worked great for 4 years that I was there. And actually, maybe me being gone from there was part of a casualty of a little bit of an economic downturn. And it was at a time when Disney said, well, if they're writing us that check so quickly, gee, imagine how much money we could get if our bean counters were counting the beans instead of their bean counters. So then their bean counters started, and then they started squeezing a little bit here and there, and they tried, then there were budgets. Oh my gosh, a budget? ESPN never had budgets. And then they decided to have budgets, and I think I got on the wrong side.
As we were talking before we came on, I was listening to the Peter Kostis interview.
Yeah.
And he was saying that, in his opinion, that the tour and CBS and the network are the tour in particular is not looking so much at the product anymore. They're looking more at bottom line and numbers and how they're going to increase purses and so forth. And they got to charge these vendors like CBS and FedEx. Did you see something similar happening as Disney started looking at finances and not so much the product like you guys were?
Look at all cutbacks ESPN's had in the year. There was never a cutback, a severe cutback like they've had it 2 or 3 times in the last 6 or 8 years at ESPN, where they've just cut off, and they've cut meat. They've not only cut on-air people, but they've cut the people that made it great, and the people who put together the great stories that you see, and all of the producers and all of the stuff that made it all happen. Now it's an assembly line more.
It's not the same product.
No. Yeah, and the same. It is the same product in that every one of those 7 million basketball games you can watch are all the same. You notice they're all the same. They all have the same guys doing them. They all have the same guys, and it's okay. This is what you want. This is what we're doing. It's kind of. I see that happening a little bit with golf on TV. It's become more of a packaged deal, and it's not. Every tournament, the thing I loved about covering the tour for radio is that every tournament is different. Every tournament has its own vibe, its own
culture.
Yeah. Start with the golf courses. They're all different. You never play the same. It's not like a basketball court where it's always the same.
That's right.
The only thing different is the crowd. The golf course was different. The players were different. The mix of players was always different. The galleries were different. In the big cities, in L.A., okay, the tour's in town. Well, okay, what else? Yeah, but what else can we do? Hilton Head, the Quad Cities, any of the smaller cities. It was the biggest thing that happened there all year.
Right.
And so it was. You got that different bit of energy from each place, and so it's. And I see and I think it's not a good thing that the network TV and Golf Channel just has so much volume that they've got to keep up with. It's hard for them now, I think, harder to capture the difference that makes every tournament unique.
They're because of the volume they do, it seems like they have to make it cookie cutter. But like it's going to fit into the here's our plan, and we're going to do it no matter if we're in Hilton Head or if we're in.
And it's going to be the same thing.
Like you said,
that's
a shame
on there, and then it's up to the tournaments then to try to give them something a little bit different, whether it's the different kind of car giveaway for a hole-in-one, or whether it's the Boeing jet flying by, in Hilton Head that is a pretty cool little thing that nobody else does.
Right.
So then it's up to the tournaments to try to figure out how to make it.
Yeah, and it's a fine line between what becomes gimmicky and what becomes enhancing the product.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And hopefully a lot of them don't lose that.
Right. Although, on the other hand, a little bit of gimmicky is good. New Orleans, which usually always kind of had a bad spot on the tour, still doesn't have a very good spot on the tour, but they come up with the idea of the two-man teams. It's terrific. It gives them something different.
Completely.
And it makes them, some guys now want to play it because of that. It's not just, okay, there's a tournament this week and I can go make some money. Gee, I can play with one of my buddies. They let the guys make their teams, and they which is great and something they needed to do. Hilton Head does what Hilton Head does, and that's great, and the guys know that, and that's cool. What you got to do is, those tournaments kind of in the middle of the year. Okay, how are we going to be different from what was last week and what's next week?
Right.
Detroit and Minneapolis and the Quad Cities, and all, they are all different places, but that's the part they are now trying to work on is
what's the draw? How are they going to draw? Like John Deere, they let all the guys get to go play on the tractors, and
that's their draw. Yeah, it's very family. And then they did the thing they did before the tractors when they knew they needed to is they had that terrible date right before the Open Championship.
They chartered the jet.
The plane. We'll hold the plane, and you guys. They finally, I think the first couple of years they gave them the seats. I think that then they finally decided, we don't really have to do that. We can charge them for it, but we'll give them a deal and we'll take them right to where they're playing.
Right.
And it's a really Louis Oosthuizen was the greatest though about the John Deere, the tractor. Louis,
he has a farm, doesn't he?
Well, he has a farm.
Yeah.
And he went when he went to play it for the first time. And he was kind of drawn in by the fact that it was John Deere, and he had in South Africa, he has John Deere. So he went and he just had a blast. He did all the corporate things they asked him to do because he could go see more tractors.
More stuff, more toys.
And, he wanted, they have little model tractors that are the T markers. He's, I want one of those. And obviously they got him one. And then he got on the plane and went over and won. He won the Open. And then they thought, because he had not won John Deere, but then he went and won the Open. And, well, we'll never get him back because now it's the week before and he'll not want to do. Oh, no, the next year, as the defending Open champ, instead of being over there getting ready on whatever course, Sunday or Saturday, I think he finally left. He missed the cut. It actually worked out great for him because he came over for the early stuff in the week and did stuff, missed the cut, couldn't get out until Sunday anyway, but went ahead and went out commercial. And early in the day, but spent the whole day Saturday up in the corporate boxes of John Deere, schmoozing,
having a blast,
and shaking hands and doing everything they wanted him to do. And he now has an invitation there forever. I mean, he'll be the king of the Quad Cities as long as he ever wants.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So that's the stuff that I guess it's good in a way that the competition makes these tournaments have to get a little creative, and that doesn't let it get stale.
Right. I mean, you don't want them to get stale. You want to keep them interesting, and that certainly did that.
Your time at ESPN, I mean, you were there with Dan Patrick and Oberman, obviously.
96 to 02, yep.
Berman and Linda Cohn, Robin Roberts.
That whole gang.
Yep.
I spent a whole year. I actually kept track one year because I was doing a lot of sports centers. And 1998, I actually did more sports centers than anybody there. Usually the 6 o'clock. And partly because Bob Lee was doing the World Cup. But Charlie Steiner was there, and Robin Roberts was there, and me. It was usually the three of us, and the job of the show was to make Charlie laugh. What can we do to make Charlie crack up and lose it during the show? Robin and I would take turns trying to do that, and that was always fun. And but I got to do one night. They had a scheduling quirk, and they needed. I guess Olbermann decided he wanted to be in New York. The day of the Jackie Robinson Day, the first big day when they did Jackie Robinson Day, that show won an Emmy. I never got my Emmy for that one, but Dan Patrick and I did that show together in Bristol. It looked weird, and Patrick still talks about it on his radio show anytime he has Rich Eisen on, because Rich Eisen is still jealous that for some reason it worked out schedule-wise that I got that show and not him. So I worked that show with Dan, and Keith was down in the Bronx, and or he was either at Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium, but to do the whole Jackie Robinson thing. So quirky things.
As a unit, as a group, was that group as cohesive off the air as you guys and the ladies that were all seen on?
It wasn't. Everybody did their own thing. There were no, at least from my side of it, there were no jealousies or no problems when we were together. But we really weren't together. Everybody came. We didn't all live in the same suburb. We all lived in different kinds of places and had different kinds of things going. Socially, I probably only saw a couple of the guys. Larry Beal and I did a couple of things socially together. But it was kind of weird. It was like a baseball team with 25 cabs coming in, and dropping the guys off, and then 25 cabs leaving in different directions at the end of the game. But it wasn't. We weren't that close, but we all got along.
You never heard any negative stories coming out there.
Yeah, that wasn't.
No jealousy. Everyone's like,
everybody was pretty good. And you talk about the Pro Tour. There were a lot of egos involved in too. So, but they the show was still the star. The stars were not the anchor people were not. The show was still the star, and I think that kept everybody's ego a little bit in check, because we all knew. The guy sitting next to you could replace you tomorrow real easily. So, better get your job done.
ESPN always seemed to be somewhat of an outside the box thinking organization. Is that true?
Was I'm not sure. And again, I don't know the people running it now, so I don't know where they are. They've made some decisions that looked really outside the box, but only weird outside the box. No, you were encouraged to think outside the box. How can we do this differently?
Yeah, it seemed like they gave the anchors or whoever was hosting the show the freedom to, or at least it gave you some freedom to add your thoughts or creativity.
Stuart Scott was the classic with that, with all of his catchphrases and whatever. Sometimes they had to kind of close their eyes and cover their ears because Stu was going to do something.
Kenny Mayne was another one I remember always coming up with some stuff.
Obviously, Kenny was crazy, and he would do. But they gave us some latitude. The guys who and I'm pretty sure it's still that way. The anchors wrote the shows. Now, it's not that way in network TV a lot of times. I mean, you have a script and you read what somebody else wrote. But no, we had to write the show. That was actually that was the work of the job, was the 6, 7, 8 hours. I mean, I went in at 9. If we had a 6 o'clock show, we had a meeting at 10 o'clock or 10:30, and then I spent the day writing my part of the show. So
you always, or I at least always got that feeling that there was a lot of time spent, because the person who was doing the reporting, whatever anchor or the two anchors it was, knew almost exactly what they were going to say. A lot of preparation.
We wrote the lead-ins to all the stories, all the games. You'd come up with, okay, what's going to be the kind of the story angle we think that's going to happen. You'd write that, but then you might never have seen the highlight. You're given a sheet by somebody, the people who prepared the highlights. They're handing that to you live on the air while it's happening a lot of times, and you're just kind of, okay, what do I know? And you had a couple of little what we called nuggets kind of written down on your script that you could throw in case something happened, or if somebody hit golf, a perfect example. What's this guy done this year? You knew you had a couple of names at least, and a couple of stories you could tell while you're showing the highlights of the guys doing stuff. So that was the during the show. The hour of the show was a free for all. It was crazy.
Do y'all have alumni get-togethers or anything like that?
No, I wish we did. The nice part is that once you've done it, and I think it's this way. You played professional golf, anybody who's played on the tour, the other guys, there's a respect. Okay, you did, even if you're not doing it now, you did it once. And, anytime I bump into any of the guys, it's like old home week again. It's I see, I used to see Chris Berman used to play at Pebble Beach. I think he played again this year at Pebble Beach.
Yeah, I think so.
And Chris was the first guy I met at ESPN when I went to work there. He came up to me and introduced himself, like he had to introduce himself, but he did. And it was fun. That was nice. And anytime I bump into him, it's, hey, how you doing? What's going on? Family stuff and whatever. And so everybody had kind of a mutual respect for each other, even though they don't do. I wish they did do alumni kind of thing.
Yeah, that'd be kind of cool, and especially if they
fun.
covered it. They had some alumni dinner.
They might do. They probably are coming up on an anniversary or a millionth show or whatever. That whether or not I get invited, I don't know. But
they could call it the Mothership Reunion.
There you go.
Patrick always calls it the Mothership.
Yeah, the Mothership.
There was a book that I was.
There've been a bunch of books. Which
one? the Uncensored History.
I think I've got that book. Yeah.
Was that? I haven't read it, but is that someone just trying to make a name?
Or there are half a dozen books that were written more in the heyday than now. But there've been history books. Heck, the guys who started ESPN ended up living here in Hilton Head for a time, and the Connecticut guys. But there have been a number of books supposedly with the inside story and all that. And Oberman and Patrick wrote a book about that, and the books all have. They're not. They're okay. They're not scandalous rip jobs. They're not. They try to. I think it's more than anything. They try to have as many stories and anecdotes on different people as they can, and try to. Who are these people who are doing this kind of a thing?
Not to pull back the curtain and say, here's...
And if they're pulling back the curtain, they're not going to find much. But there's not a whole lot of intrigue, I don't think, in how it all works. It's just all the different personalities.
When you left there, was it result of cutbacks or...
It was their choice, not mine.
Disney,
yes.
right?
But I was at the end of a contract, and that was actually at about the time... I'm sure Peter Kostas has a similar story that he's selling now. I would probably, if it were selling my story, I would say that was right about the time they did that. They did a whole promotional campaign that anybody could be a SportsCenter anchor. Remember, and they ended up with some kid who ended up winning it, and they made it a competition that when the reality show thing first hit, ESPN wanted to be in on it. My salary probably paid for that. So they got much more programming out of that than they were going to get out of me. And I can actually claim to fame that I'm the oldest white non-athlete that they'd ever hired to be a SportsCenter anchor. So it was natural after a time that I was older than their demographic, and it's all kids now.
Was the reasoning, we're going in another direction?
We're going in another direction. That's the title of that'll be, if I ever write the book, because that's happened to me 2 or 3 times in my career, we're going in another direction. And
don't you love that one?
Yeah, I love that one. And I've heard it 2 or 3 times, and I want to make it the title of my book when I finally write it.
What are, because you've seen so many sports, golf and otherwise, what are some of the craziest things that you've seen? Maybe that jump in your mind relatively quickly.
Well, categorize it a little bit. Give me
that you just maybe said to yourself. You looked at your
give me a sport or
co-host to just say, did that just happen?
Time at ESPN kind of thing. Boy, that's a good one. I'm trying to think if there was any particular event, Tiger, I was there during quite a bit of Tiger's heyday, so anything he did was pretty remarkable because I consider myself a little bit of a historian. I know a little bit about what's happened, and the stuff he was doing was just, outrageously crazy.
Yeah, it was something that had never been seen before.
I'm trying to think. Boy, I should have prepped better for that.
It is a very broad question. Yeah, as I was thinking of kind of interesting things as you're doing these sports centers, and you just sit there and like, wow, that was just
But you know what? The beauty of it was that was every night.
Is that kind of the genesis of the top 10 when they came up with that?
It was almost more that. It was like, this is amazing. In every game, I mean, you could even get a Pittsburgh Cincinnati baseball game in the middle of July that didn't matter, but you might see something. I mean, that's still to me the fascination of sport.
Right.
And Steve Bornstein, who was the CEO of ESPN for a time when I first got there, and he coined the phrase, "You can't rent tonight's game." And it was right when Blockbuster was at its peak, and
right.
everybody was renting movies. But the magic of ESPN was you can't rent tonight's game. It's going to do something that you don't think, that you haven't seen before, didn't expect. But every game is like that, and every sport is like that. And what made ESPN cool early on was that you got to see that from games you didn't otherwise pay attention to.
Yeah, because
nobody had back in the day the highlights of all the games tonight.
No, and when I was a kid, that's why I think was it 79 ESPN kind of.
Yeah, 79.
With the proliferation of cable TV.
Yeah.
And I can remember, because, I was, 7 years old. So I'm like, I want to watch cartoons. I want to watch the football and the basketball. And I don't want to watch tennis or sports racing, all this other stuff. Well, why they got to put all this stuff on? But to me,
But they had the games. They were smart enough to get the games, and they were smart enough to get even the games they didn't have. And so you could watch SportsCenter and see the highlights of all the games.
Right, and that was the best part.
That was the best. Well, and that's how what started it, and they were the only ones who did that. So then that's how it got built, and then they branched off from that and did so many other things.
Was it the 30 for 30 with the growth of ESPN and the Big East basketball?
That was a huge part.
That was really cool.
30 for 30 happened after I left. What I was a part of, or got to be a part of at least, the hype of, was the Sports Century project, where they were right at the turn of the century, and they did, the guy who was the mastermind of that ended up getting to run ESPN for a little while, and then decided to go run amusement parks or something, and I'm not sure whatever happened to him, but anyway, he was that was an amazing project because they realized there was a necessity to record the history of all of this.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk to all these people before they die, and let's make sure we've got all of this so that it'll perpetuate itself, down the road.
Yeah, they became the conduit.
Yeah,
they had all the material. It's like, look, we need to get this story out there. Yeah, I thought they were awesome.
They did the 50 greatest athletes, but then they did some other things off of that. Some of those people went to the NFL Network when it started. And now you see them doing, now they're doing the same thing. They just had their 100th anniversary. They had all kinds of programming through that. And they do those special shows, A Football Life or whatever, where they do a guy's life and talk to a lot of other people. And it's great because it creates the history that we're not going to get otherwise, because we all get old and die.
No kidding. When you think of great golf announcers, who comes to mind?
Well, my all-time favorite announcer, because he's the guy I grew up with, was Vin Scully, living on the West Coast, growing up on the West Coast. Vin Scully did the NFL and was really good at it. He did golf. He has a couple of the Masters calls.
I watched a few of the old broadcasts.
Yeah,
that's Vin Scully.
And so he could even do that. There are guys in certain spots. Summerall and Venturi were really good at Augusta together. I'm not I've never been a huge fan of any of the folks really that NBC has had on over the last few years. But Faraday. I mean, Faraday's Faraday. I still love to tell stories. The folks in Hilton Head will know this. The 14th hole of the Great Par 3 at Harbortown, and I will tell the people that I caddy for that Faraday used to spend a fair amount of Saturdays in that house behind the 14th green because there was a party going on in the back of it. And when he was drinking and when he was
and the pool is right there on top of the green.
He was right, yeah, and he was right there in the middle of all that while he was supposed to be doing the broadcast. I love Faraday because he doesn't take it too seriously, and yet he knows the game. He's not there to play clown. He played in a Ryder Cup. He's written books about the Ryder Cup. He knows the game and knows all the people, and they all know him. I think Faraday. I'm a fan of Faraday. I'm a fan of some of the people who have, former players who have become good at it on the broadcasting side. I tell a quick story. Roger Maltby saved me once. I was doing the radio, and we were at Doral for the, I guess it was a WGC at Doral, and that Dustin ended up winning, I think. Anyway, I'm with Dustin's group, and he pulls a ball on Sunday. He pulls a ball a little bit into the rough, and it kind of gets in with the people, and the people move back. And I walk along. I stepped on Dustin's ball. I stepped on it. I don't know how I did that. Roger was working it for NBC, and he said, "You go that way." He says, "I'll take care of this." And so, because he saw me, he either saw me, I can't remember if I stepped on it or I kicked it, but I moved Dustin's ball while we were
and here he is playing
fairway.
for $1 million some
dollars.
dollars.
Here he is playing. I mean, you can't do that. And fortunately, it wasn't on TV. Word got around. I got a phone call that night from the radio people. How could you do that? And from the tour people. I mean, mistakes happen. In 6 years, I kicked one ball. And so, but it was those kind of things will happen. And Roger was great because he came over and he said, "You go on up. I'll take care of this. I'll fix it." And he did. And nobody knew. And everything was fine. And tournament went on.
You know what I see in broadcasting, and it's like you mentioned Vin Scully. I grew up in Detroit listening to Ernie Harwell call the Tigers game.
I got to meet Ernie Harwell, one of the highlights of my life.
And
loved it.
The old timers. Now, of course, it was a different era, but they were thrown baptism by fire. Here, go call this game, and they just had to learn and teach themselves. And of course, they have the natural talent, the Keith Jacksons,
Yep.
Johnny Mose, Mel Allen, all those types. Yep. But you take somebody like a Johnny Miller, and I think he's polarizing, but you could appreciate it, even if you don't like him. I think Brandel Chambly kind of falls into that category.
I think Chambly's pretty good. I'm not sure I think he's as good as he thinks he is, but and Johnny could kind of be the same. I had met Johnny Miller when I was a kid going to the Bob Hope Classic, when he was at the top of his game. And I thought he was kind of a jerk but he was a big time player. I mean, he could be
right,
and he could get away with it. And he's always been pretty confident in his abilities too. But Johnny, what I love about Johnny is he'll say whatever's on his mind. It might not have any relationship to reality, but it's what he thinks, and he's been there. I give him all the credit in the world. He's been there. He's done that. He probably played the greatest round of golf anyone's ever played in our lifetimes. That's 63 at Oakmont.
Even if you look at like basketball at ESPN, you had Dick Vitale. I guess
classics.
Right. What I'm getting at is, as we spoke to earlier, that the big corporations and conglomerates are coming in. They're not looking so much at the product, so they're not letting people be authentic so much as they want them to fit a mold, which is sad to see because you're seeing less and less. I mean, could Vitale announce a game today?
Could he get a job announcing?
Could he even get a job?
That's a good question. And Dick, I'll tell a Dick Vitale story. Nobody, believe it or not, you think Dick Vitale just is Dick Vitale. He is living on his caricature. Dick Vitale worked really hard at it. Now, the years I was there, I saw Dick in an airport one time in Orlando, and I had been on vacation for a week and was getting ready to go back up, and he was waiting for a plane. I was waiting for a plane, different planes, and we started chatting again, and he said, "You're from Cleveland, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I was there." He says, "What's Cleveland State doing up there? What's going on with the basketball?" He was thinking, he was working, he was trying to learn something more that he might use down the road someplace.
Right.
And I was always impressed that he did not just walk in be Dick Vitale and get away with it.
It blew my mind because he was really popular when I was in high school, middle school, high school. So that's going to be mid to late 80s and early 90s. And he would sit there and rip off high school kids' names that I knew from playing AAU or whatever ball against them. And I'm just like, how does this guy know all these? And he would do that from state to state to state. He knew everybody.
He knew everybody.
He knew who their parents were. He knew what they did with their hobbies.
And
like,
back then, that mattered.
And there was no
and
internet.
I think it still matters.
Really,
it still drives me crazy when I watch a college football game that they might tell you that a kid is a junior, some linebacker or whatever. Yeah, he's a junior, and they might tell you what his hometown is, but they might not.
Right.
That's the basis of that. That's what this all is.
The story. What's the story?
Where are these kids from? And especially at the high levels. We know that Tua is from Hawaii because he's got a strange name. Mm-hmm. But would anybody have known that? I'm trying to remember who it was. I was just thinking of one of the great college quarterbacks who is from Georgia but doesn't play for a Georgia Southern team. Anybody even know that he's not even from around here? Joe Burrow, the LSU quarterback. Mm-hmm. He's an Ohio kid.
Right. I saw that. I couldn't believe it.
Eastern Ohio, it was lived at Ohio U. It was the local team. And Ohio State he went to Ohio State for a year or two and didn't make it. Wow. So he transferred and now he'll never have to buy a drink in Louisiana the rest of his life. So
you know how we talked earlier about golfers helping each other, let's say after a round or what have you. In the instructional world, like coaches will go learn from other coaches. Mm-hmm. So if you're very proficient in full swing, you might go to a short game coach or a putting coach and, hey, call them up. Hey, I'd like to come watch you give a few lessons. Do you mind? Does that happen in broadcasting or communications? Like, if you could go back 25 years, would you call up a Keith Jackson and say, can I come sit with you and just pick your brain? Or does that happen at all?
It doesn't, and it probably should.
Mm-hmm.
I've thought about it, but I never saw anyone else do it, so I never did it. It was just kind of, everybody does their own thing. But yeah, no, it would be there's a real good reason to do it, and it would be smart. I have only watched people do them, doing game maybe before the first one I did, just to kind of see how they organized it, maybe. But no, I wish that's a good idea.
Yeah, I see that.
If I had to do over again, I think
well, I see, especially as golf gets more specialized, like everything has gone specialized. You see that culture of helping one another. You see it in the instructional side more and more as people go into their categories of what they focus on a daily basis. But yeah, I think it's a good thing for anything.
Yeah,
any profession.
No, that would be good for
right.
It would be good if media people did that more. Yeah.
Are you still doing the PGA Tour Radio or
I don't. No, I haven't done it now for 5 or 6 years. And again, I think it was a case of they wanted to go in another direction. Mm-hmm. They wanted to do. I was there at its beginning actually, and it was a lot of fun because we had Michael Collins, who's now carved a niche with it for himself at ESPN and being kind of the crazy caddy, and he was a stand-up comic, but he knew the game. And he was on the radio with us, and you never knew what he was going to do. But it was usually pretty. Sometimes he'd go a little far off, but most of the time he was good, and he'd be there for the big call. And John McGinnis now, who the guys who have their own radio shows, used to be out on the courses a little more. It's an interesting world, that whole thing. Yeah, I mean, we had a train of thought going there, and I lost it. I jumped the tracks.
Oh, that's okay. It happens. Let me go. Let me give you a question. So I asked you a question. What was the most amazing things you ever seen? What about when you were doing the encores for Sirius and XM and Tour Radio? Well, what was some of the most awesome?
I got to see 4 holes in one.
Wow!
In the 6 years, and they were all actually in the early years. One of the coolest I got to see was at Riviera, that 6th hole at Riviera with the bunker in the middle of it. Pin was up front. It was a gettable. It was a hole-in-one kind of day.
Was that when Rich Beam got it and jumped on top?
I was there that year. I wasn't. We weren't. None of us were on that hole because Rich wasn't doing all that well. But but it was Saturday. It was a Saturday, and when you play the West Coast tournaments, you're playing early because it's East Coast time. You're trying to hit the window for the East Coast time. So it's 10 in the morning maybe, and the final group's out. And it was in this case, Jeff Quinney and Phil were the final group, and Quinney makes an ace at 6. He hits it right behind the hole. I call it. Comes back down, dribbles back down, boom, hole in one. They give maybe the worst chest bump in sports history, and then Phil gets up and hits the ball, hits it almost to the same spot, rolls it back, and doesn't miss more than 3-4 inches from putting one in on top of him. And it was just, everybody just had a great, and so that's an amazing thing that I'll remember. I'll remember maybe my all-time best call was in Hartford at the Travelers Championship. Hunter Mahan, remember how good Hunter Mahan used to be?
Ryder Cupper.
Yeah, where's he gone? Hunter Mahan at 18 in a playoff, 18th hole, and he hits a wedge shot in that hits in front of the cup, hits in back of the cup, and spins back to about 6 inches and wins. And, and here's how, fortunes and fates can turn. The guy he beat in the playoff, Jay Williamson, was a guy out of St. Louis who was a good player.
Oh, he came in like second at Hartford, three
he
years
lost
in a
the
row.
Playoff. He lost the playoff to Mahan. He lost a playoff at John Deere that would have gotten him into the British Open for winning. He lost a playoff there maybe the next year. The poor guy never did win, and because he didn't win, he never had any status.
Never had his exemptions or anything.
Yeah, the exemptions and stuff. So he is the classic journeyman grinder, made a pretty good living. I think he's selling insurance now in St. Louis and probably doing real well at it and still plays at a pretty high level. But, he came that close twice within a couple of years of sealing his career. I mean, he could have never had to do anything but play golf, and he'd had it.
And it's amazing what confidence will do to breed more confidence. You look at a guy's career like that, just one bounce or one putt falls in, and maybe he goes on to win multiple times. And it's
Sean McKeel. Remember him?
Yep.
Won a PGA.
PGA.
I don't think he ever won anything else. But winning that PGA set him up. It gave him the opportunities to do some things and kept his name up there. Everybody will remember Sean McKeel was a PGA champion. And I got to know him a little bit later on in his career, and he was still trying to find it, still trying to capture the magic. I think he's just now old enough to be on the Champions Tour, and because he won a major, he's got some status. Yeah. So he gets a chance to play, and I hope he does well. He'd be a great podcast. His dad, I always thought this was one of the most interesting stories. McKeel lives in Memphis, grew up in Memphis, moved to Memphis as a kid because his dad was a pilot for FedEx. I always wanted to hear his dad's story. How do you're an airline pilot, and this company comes to you and says, we're going to start doing this thing where you'll only fly all night, but you're going to make a really good living, and you can be home during the day.
Okay.
Well, that whole FedEx theory. Yeah, if you were a pilot, you're saying, yeah, right.
And we're a startup.
Yeah, and we're a startup too. And we're gonna start it up out of Memphis. You're gonna move to Memphis, and we'll make you one of our pilots. And that's kind of not sportsy, but kind of out there. But I always thought that was one of the. And this guy believed, okay, that's why Tommy John should be in the Hall of Fame. By the way, in baseball. Because he was the first guy. I mean, when they did
for no other reason that the surgery is named after him.
They still, a doctor told him, we're going to take a tendon out of your right arm and put it in your left arm, your pitching arm, and it's going to work, and you're going to be able to play again. And he bought that line. Dr. Job sold him that line.
It was either that or he's not playing anymore. It's kind of decisions made for him.
Right, but he did it.
But he did it.
And there could have been probably another way that was a little more traditional, but he did it, and it worked.
How about the guy that I think there might have even been a 30 for 30, the guy who started the free agency? He wouldn't.
The first free agent.
Free agent.
Yeah. Messersmith and McNally in baseball, and they got those guys. You're gonna risk it all, but if it works, you're gonna get rich.
Since we're on that topic, I got a real cool one for you. So my dad's cousins, my uncle for all intents and purposes, he played for the Yankees in the early '60s, and when baseball had its expansion, the Angels started. He was the first player taken. And this was about 10 or 12 years ago. USA Today had a huge expose on him because it was the first expansion draft in history.
Okay, yeah.
And he was the very first player taken.
Wow.
Who's that? Eli Gerba.
Eli Gerba.
Yeah. So that was a pretty cool. In fact, I got his.
See, I always thought it was Paul Popovich that related to you. And
he was actually
played for the Cubs.
He was a neighbor of my aunt's.
Was he really?
In Northbrook, Illinois. And his son and I used to. We were like 4 or 5 years old. We used to play wiffle ball together, and when we go to Chicago and hang out.
Eli Gerba. All right.
Yeah, so a lot of sports. So I'm sure we could sit here all night.
Yeah, do that kind of stuff. Yeah.
In the 40 years, the amazing career you had in broadcasting, looking back, is there anything you would have changed?
I would have kept a couple of the jobs. No, you know what? You can't have any regrets. And a guy that I worked with when I lived in Oklahoma, and I had the opportunity. I'd been on TV and in radio in Tulsa, Oklahoma, a great city that occasionally gets big time stuff and is a great college market. And I had the chance to go to Cleveland, and not for the same job, for the weekend job, the number 2 job in a major city that I had never been to. And one of the guys, we were just sitting over a beer one night, and one of the guys told me, he says, you only regret the things in life you don't do.
Right.
And I really took that to heart. And so I said, I wanted, I kind of wanted to know what was going to happen, so I did it. And the same thing for ESPN. The only mistake I made, the mistake in reasoning, when I went from Cleveland to ESPN, even though I was going from being the big dog in a pretty good-sized market to being just one of the team, I always thought, okay, if that doesn't work at ESPN, the fact that I've had that visibility, anybody is going to hire me to come back and do it. That's what I thought. And I happened to hit a downturn when ESPN let me. It was kind of a downturn in the market, and it was also at a time when TV stations were cutting sports guys. We have stations here in every market now that don't even do sports on the news at night. And I happened to hit that, and so I didn't have an obvious place to land when it ended. But you make the best, you make lemons out of the lemonade. And when we moved to Hilton Head, and that's when I got involved with the tour doing radio, and had another great run there.
Yeah, life shoots you on different directions. At the time, you think it's just, why me? And the next thing you know is you've got some door open. It's like, it never would have been. I never would have done this if that wouldn't happen.
That's right. And the things I got to do in Cleveland that I couldn't have done in Oklahoma, that I got to do. I got to be a part of the first World Series that they'd had in 40 some odd years, and got to go to. Got to travel a little bit with that and be a part of a World Series and the Cleveland Browns. I get to meet Jim Brown at 70. I was still scared of him.
Still a specimen, huh?
Well, he was just Jim Brown. He wasn't all that big. And I'm thinking, this guy, ran over people all those years, and was in the Dirty Dozen and did all that, and he just has that aura that he is still the baddest dude in town, and still does that, and covering the Cavaliers when Michael Jordan was big and Cleveland was the second best team, but Jordan would always break their hearts, but doing that and getting to know some of those guys and kind of how the NBA worked and no, I wouldn't. Yeah, you'd like to have had more success in certain situations, but there's no regrets. It's been a fun ride.
Cool. Want to do some rapid fire and then get you out of here?
Yeah, sure.
All right. First one, your dream foursome.
That's not hard. My dad. Can I have?
You can have anyone you want. Your dream foursome.
Well, I want him to be a part of it. My dad, my father-in-law, who I've got to play with quite some. The two of them got along so well. In fact, my dream foursome might have actually happened because my wife set this up. We were going out to a wedding in California, and she and her dad and me were going to a wedding in California for her family, and my dad flew down, and we played Spyglass.
Oh, wow.
The four of us played Spyglass together, and it was the first time the two dads had met. We were not yet married, and they hit it off, and it was just... I can still tell you shots that were played that day, and that's almost 30 years ago.
That's probably the coolest one of all what I've done, 20 episodes, and that's probably the coolest.
That's a pretty good dream foursome. Now, dream foursome that includes real players. I would love to be with Jack. Jack would have to be a part of it, just because he is the best interview I've ever done. Consistently, you can ask anybody in the business who's the best interview in the business, and it's Jack. He listens to your question. He gives you an answer, very often an answer you didn't expect, but he's Jack. And he was not that way as a younger player. He was not known to be that forthcoming and that honest, but he's just Jack, and he's terrific. So I would love to have Jack in it. He maybe would take the place of my wife. I hope she's not listening. In the dream foursome. So when the guys wanted to, because I also think having Jack in the foursome, my dad and my father-in-law would have loved to have played with Jack too. So
I don't think she'd hold it against you.
Okay.
Here's an odd one. Your favorite superhero?
Superhero? Because I'm not big on the superhero movies. Well, this will be a story. Batman. The original TV Batman. Took my wife to the prom. Or my mother to the prom. I'm sorry, not my wife. Took my mother to the prom. They grew up in the same town.
Adam West. Adam West?
Yep. Well, I don't know. I never knew him. I knew his parents because they still lived up there where we all grew up.
That's pretty cool.
But yeah, Batman took mom.
See, so it's not. So now I don't feel bad. It was a strange question.
No,
there's always. I got to come up with different questions.
You never know. And how would you have known that if you hadn't asked?
If you could caddy for anybody, who would it be? Any time in history.
Any time in history. Boy, that's a tough one. Phil would be fun to caddy for because I think we'd argue over how to play different shots, and in the end, he'd win. I mean, I always thought Bones had a really cool job because he could sort of tell Phil what to do, but then Phil could pull a thing like he did down at Sawgrass where I didn't want to tell him because I saw this window, and I try to do that with players. I said, well, if there's a window up there, that you can get it through, but it's about the size of that basement window that in your first apartment, not very big. Of the guys that I can think of right off the top of my head, Phil would have been fun to caddy for. Guys who had a good time. It's 4 hours out there.
Fuzzy Zeller.
Fuzzy probably would have been a lot of fun. Yeah, right. that would have been cool. I would love to have maybe caddied for whoever Arnie was playing with, just to see that. I would like to see that, have seen that from inside the ropes, and to have the banter that you have with the other player and caddy when you're inside the ropes doing something. It wouldn't have to be at a major, but be the caddy for whoever Arnie was playing with would have been fun. Arnie would have been too much pressure, but
afraid to step on his golf ball.
Yeah, I don't want to kick his golf ball.
Ryder Cup's got the walk-up song now, right? They play at the first tee.
Yeah.
What would your walk-up song be?
Oh man, that's hard. Boy, I don't have an answer to that. I'm speechless.
That's okay.
Which is hard to do. I never really thought of what I would do for. You know what? It would probably be, because it's my favorite. Pandora. It would probably be something Earth, Wind, and Fire, something kind of brassy and fun, and get people in a good mood.
All right, cool. What's your superpower?
I might be the fairest person I know. I think I would make a really good judge and a really lousy lawyer because I can see a lot of different sides of any different issue, but yet and yet I have a hard time advocating. I can see the merits in any of them. Therefore, I'm probably not a good advocate for one because, I've never been a very good salesman because I can't say this is the best thing you can do because it might not be. I know that there's something else that's there.
Right.
It could be.
If you wouldn't have gone in communication, you would have been a what?
It's turned out I do love caddying. It's fun. I would love to have been a pro caddy. I think that would be fun. I still think I would love to have somebody's bag for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, how about this? A European tour caddy.
There's a lot of travel.
Or I would like to work the European tour on TV. That would actually still be my dream job, is to work the European tour.
Just to see all the different places?
Just to see all the, because I love to travel.
They go to some beautiful places.
And they go to some wonderful places. And to be a part of the circus, that was always part of the fun of being, doing tour radios. We were a part of the circus. Mm-hmm. My badge could get me anywhere, and I knew, the rules guys and the setup guys, and all of the inside people that nobody knows. Steve Hulka, who carries everybody's equipment from tournament to tournament. All those guys, and they were all part of it, and they knew you. And being a part of the circus comes to town at every PGA Tour stop, and it really is like Ringling Brothers doing it. And to watch the circus and be a part of the circus would still be my dream job.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Favorite golf movie?
Oh, that's how can you not love Caddyshack?
Right,
it's still the classic. I've tried to be impacted by the 7 Days to Utopia and some of those other ones that have gotten kind of esoteric. But
Tin Cup comes up a little bit.
Tin Cup is it? Yeah. Although it's a little more. It tries to be real. And it's not.
No.
It doesn't happen that way. Rene Russo is spectacular. She could be my shrink anytime.
Right.
But, Costner, it was funny. I used to get to play. There was a course outside Cleveland that was men only. Sharon was the name of the country club or golf club. And the only woman who worked on the premises was the lady who baked the cookies. And that's where McCord took Costner in the weeks around the World Series of Golf in Akron. The week before and then maybe the week after, McCord took, because they could play every day and nobody would bother them. Mm-hmm. And that's where I think Gary McCord, at least the story as I had always heard, was McCord was the one who really sharpened Costner's game so that it would be passable for the show,
I think Costner was a baseball player, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he's done all those baseball movies.
College level.
Yeah, obviously enough of an athlete. He a passable golf swing.
Right.
Pretty good golf swing.
Yeah, when you get to Unrealable, that last scene where he keeps sucking the ball back of 18 with three wood. In the U.S. Open.
In the U.S. Open.
No one's pulling back 3 wood in the U.S. Open.
No.
Best era in golf.
Era?
Let's say that we'll go with you can go Jones era.
Yeah.
Hogan, Nicklaus, Norman, Tiger. And not the person, but the era.
To me, the Nicklaus. I mean, that's the one I grew up with. Was the Nicklaus era, and it wasn't just Nicklaus and Palmer. It was Billy Casper. And later on, it was Tom Watson and Lee Trevino. I mean, the legends. And they all had a little piece of the pie there. Most of them, a lot of the majors got won by those guys. There were not a lot of single out of the blue Orville Moody's. There's one, but there were not a lot of guys who came out of nowhere to win a major when those guys were all playing at their peak.
They definitely had they probably win the fashion award too.
Oh man,
with the plaids and
there was some bad stuff.
What's the flaps that go over your shoelaces? The kilts.
Yeah. I had those over my over my shoes. The first few pairs of shoes.
I think I had those until
back when we had
high school. Maybe
back when you still had spikes.
Right.
Nails.
All right, the last one.
Yeah,
Tiger or Jack? Greatest of all time.
Jack. But that's my age.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up with that. Tiger may have been the best most dominant. Tiger's the most dominant for his era. I mean, the guy had like a 25% winning percentage.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's outrageous.
It's crazy.
Jack's was only about 10%, I think. But Jack played everywhere. That's another thing that if I have a knock on Tiger, okay, you've got all those wins at Pebble Beach, you've got all those wins at San Diego, you got all those wins at TPC and at Orlando and
Akron.
Go win somewhere. Go win. Well, the one thing Jack and Tiger have in common, neither one of them has ever won at Riviera. How about that? Yeah. But Jack won the Portland Open, and Jack he won here. Mm-hmm. He won. He played everywhere often enough to win everywhere, so that everybody can say they saw Jack win. And not everybody has, because of the media and whatever, everybody's seen Tiger win. But how many of us have actually seen Tiger win? I got to see him a little bit when I was on the tour, but to actually see that happen, I wish more people would get to do that. I wish he would play more places. Mm-hmm. I'd love to see him come back and play Hilton Head. He played it once.
Right, I remember that.
I'd love to see guys do some of the things here's the one thing, we haven't talked about. I'd love to see Dustin Johnson now has to play here because of RBC, and he's, they own him, they're a sponsor of him, so he has to play here. He don't like this golf course much, but how much fun could Dustin Johnson have if he wanted to, if he came in and said on Monday or Tuesday when he comes in, Woods are in the locker this week, I'm going to win this thing with a 3-iron.
He probably could.
I have no doubt in my mind he could win the tournament with a 3-iron, and because it'd keep him out of trouble. I think it would be a smart strategic play. But how cool would it be for any player? But particularly, you can use Dustin and Harbortown as a good analogy of that. Mm-hmm. It's like when Phil said, "I'm going to win the U.S. Open without a driver the one year, and then with two drivers, and then with two drivers,
right?
Hey, have some fun. See if he could do it. And then if he did do it, I mean, that raises your whole level. He would become one of the greats because he went in and said, I'm going to win this thing without a driver, without a wood in my bag. And just
That'd set the world on fire, wouldn't
it? Yeah.
It'd be interesting if he did that and won to see what the next person would do.
Yeah.
I'm going to win this without my 7-iron.
Yeah. Or whatever.
Whatever club.
And I think that would be a lot of fun to see. And it wouldn't necessarily have to be just Dustin. There's a bunch of guys who could win at a couple of, at Pebble or at Harbortown, some of the more manageable courses where you've got to be accurate without the driver or without a particular club. It'd be fun to see.
If someone wanted to get a hold of you, they wanted you to come do a talk, to speak at something, do it, host something, how can people get a hold of you?
That's sweet of you to bring that up. Email, I guess, stevensb3@yahoo.com.
Okay. I'll make sure to get that when we send it out to everybody. And social media, are you on social media?
I'm not.
It's probably a smart move.
I don't think, here's my reason for not. I don't think I have anything to say. I mean, we've talked for more than an hour, obviously, but I don't think anybody cares what's going on in my life minute to minute, and I don't think I'm saying anything that's that earth-shattering minute to minute. I've only in the past couple of years started doing Facebook, so I'll do that, but I don't tweet, and I don't do any. I don't Instagram, and I don't do all that.
You helped me big time when I was the fill-in when we did the golf show.
Was
it Golf Center? What was it?
Whatever it was. Yeah,
but the biggest thing you helped me with, and I probably would have never done this podcast, or at least taken the leap to do it, because I always thought you had to come up with all these questions, do all this stuff. And I'll never forget the first show I did, and I said, Bob, how do you prepare these questions? And you said, just ask them some questions that you want to know the answer to. And it was so simple, but for me, it was so effective.
And you're really good at this too in your regular line of work. Just listen to the answer. Mm-hmm. There's another question coming. There's a question that comes from that answer, and that's people who have asked me at career things. How do you do interviews and whatever? Just listen. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a conversation. If you listen to the other guy, you'll probably have something else you want to know after they told you what you asked them.
Awesome. Hey, this has been great. I thank you enough for coming on in, making the time.
This is my first podcast. I don't even do those. So, I haven't had the opportunity. So
might have broke the ice now.
I have a daughter who is podcasts all over the internet. So, but she does a pro football podcast. That
well, what is it? What
bizarre?
It's
called Under Further Review. They've actually ended for the season. Oh, we've got company. I love it.
The pit bulls.
But she's on Facebook, Under Further Review, and she and a buddy of hers in New York do a podcast that she started doing because she was a New York Giants fan, became one, and so they talk football.
That's cool. So everyone check hers out. Listen
Yes.
to this one, and thanks for tuning in.
All right. Thank you.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up, again, on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.